And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. In those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They did not know until the flood came and carried them all away. So it will be also at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken, one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Now be sure of this. If the master of the house had known the hour of the night when the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and not let his house be broken into. So too, you also must be prepared. For at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So here we are, the first Sunday of Advent, a new liturgical year, a time to prepare. What are we preparing for? Just to refresh your memories, there are 2 themes of Advent, but it all can be said in one sentence: to prepare for the coming of Jesus Christ. So 2 different times. 1, part of Advent, we celebrate the coming of Christ at Christmas. 2, the second one, is we prepare for Christ's coming at the end of time or the end of our lives, whichever comes first. Okay? So the first 2.5 weeks, we'll be talking about, the readings will be talking about the latter part, about preparing for the time when we have to meet our Maker. And I know I don't like to do it either. I don't like to talk about my death and my time to come and my judgment and everything, but it's important. And so that's where the readings take us today. You know, in that second reading, in Paul's letter to the Romans, I don't know if you caught it or not, but there was a sense of urgency about what Paul was saying. He said, you know, the night is spent, the day's at hand. It's almost time. It's time to shape up. It's time to get ready. Why is he so urgent? Well, he believed that Christ was coming before he was going to die. The second coming. So he's really trying to, with a sense of urgency, trying to get people to say, hey, get with it. In our parlance, it would be no more sex and drugs and rock and roll. Right? He's saying, get rid of the orgies. Get rid of the booze. Get rid of the drugs. Get rid of that stuff. That if it's hampering you and getting in the way of your relationship with God, then you need to let it go, because the time is at hand. Pretty sobering, isn't it? Pretty serious. All right? And when you take that reading, and then you take the Gospel, you know, Jesus is like doubling down on what Paul was saying. He's saying, when you least expect, at a time you do not know, the Son of Man is going to come. Actually, I'm kind of glad I don't know. You know, but we have to be ready. And we have to be ready. So, like I said, these are serious readings. You know, and it's tough. Because we don't like to face our mortality, do we? And yet we're called to. All right? So, where's the hope in all that? You know, I found the hope in the first reading. All right? Isaiah has this wonderful, beautiful vision of heaven. He calls it God's mountain. God's mountain. People from all different nations, all different backgrounds, all different ways of life are going to stream there and come there and be there. And guess what? There's going to be no more war. There's going to be no more hatred. There's going to be no more prejudice. There's going to be no more bias. There's going to be no more selfishness. And if you got weapons of war, you got some swords, you got some spears, you won't need them here. You might as well make them into something useful, like plowshares and pruning hooks. So instead of using these weapons that take life away, fashion them into something that gives life, that nurtures life. That's the heaven I'm looking forward to. Because I'm a little discouraged, you know, because we seem to have lots of swords and spears, don't we? You know, we live in a world that is really messy, and frankly, it discourages me, and it wears me down sometimes. I mean, don't you get tired of this war in Ukraine? Don't you get tired of the war in Yemen that's been going on even longer than that? Don't you get tired of the government of Iran killing its own citizens because they don't approve of the clothes that they're wearing? Don't you get tired of family feuds and squabbles? You know, we just had Thanksgiving and, you know, there's some people that aren't there. Or we don't talk to that side of the family, or we have nothing to do with them. Don't you get tired of the shootings? Colorado Springs, Chesapeake, Virginia, Moscow, Idaho, and the list goes on and on and on. When can we take our swords and spears and turn them into plowshares and pruning hooks? When can we fashion those weapons of death into weapons and instruments of life and bringing and nurturing life? What are we to do? We can't change it. Well, we can a little. It all starts by your heart and my heart. If we're holding feelings of hatred, of prejudice, of bias, of anger, of resentment, and bitterness, those are the things, this is a wake-up call. Those are the things that the readings tell us today. St. Paul says quite clearly, you know, those are the things that are going to prevent us from getting to heaven. We got to let go. We got to let our hearts be hearts of peace and tolerance. We have to let our hearts be kind of emanate this peace of Christ in a world that really, really needs it. And no, we can't change the world, but we can change the people around us. We can change ourselves. If we just have a heart of peace, rather than bitterness and resentment and cruelty and war and hatred and all that, prejudice and all that stuff. And sure, we can fail. We'll fail. You know, but it doesn't mean we stop. What was that? Now I hope you're listening. Thanks, God. Might have been a power surge or something. But, you know, we really have to have hearts of peace. And even if we fail, we just got to get up and try again. Let me tell you about a story, true story. It's called Old Womb and Winnie. Old Womb was a nanny to this little boy who was born in Great Britain. And this little boy, this baby, he was born into kind of like with a silver spoon in his mouth. You know, it was very upper crust, very elite British society. And this baby's parents were too busy with their social affairs and other events and appointments, and they didn't take care of him at all. They hired a nanny. And the little baby, once he was able to talk, he called the nanny Old Womb. And Old Womb was like a mom and a dad and everything in between to this little baby. And the nanny, Old Womb, she used to call the baby Winnie. And so Winnie was just starved for the attention and the love of his parents, who had no time for him. When Winnie was 8 years old, he was sent off to a boarding school. Can you imagine 8 years old, being gone, coming home a couple of weeks for Christmas? He didn't see his parents then, but then they would off, after a few days of Christmas, they'd jet off to somewhere else. And so Winnie was with Old Womb, the nanny, all the time when he wasn't at school. And Winnie was just starving for the affection and love and attention of his parents. And so Winnie thought as he got older, he was getting out of high school, he thought, maybe if I join the army, and I come home victorious in battle, maybe then my parents will give me some respect and some attention and love. So he applies to one of the most important elite military schools in England called Harrow Military. He applied and he got rejected. He applied a second time and he got rejected. He applied a third time and he got rejected. He applied a fourth time and he made it by the skin of his teeth. And oh, did he struggle. When he struggled, by the time he graduated, he did graduate though. By the time he graduated, he was last in his class. Last in class rank, okay? And so he gets off, he becomes a soldier, you know, and he goes off to war. And his first war was in South Africa against the Boers. The Brits had a military involvement in there. And so he goes and he fights for them, and he gets captured, becomes a prisoner of war. no military glory in that, right? And so he didn't do so well there. Their second war was against Turkey. And by this time he's older and he's an officer, and he concocts this plan to go charge with all his forces he's got, full steam ahead, right in the heart of the Turkish army in the battle. And all his little underlings and junior officers said, "Are you crazy? This is not going to work. This is suicide. We're going to lose." And he said, "No, this is what we're going to do." And so a lot of his junior officers, they just quit. They resigned. They said, "This is crazy." So when he goes in with his forces, and it was a disaster. 250,000 British soldiers died in this war against Turkey. And Turkey lost 250,000 as well. 500,000 lives because of this man's decision, Winnie's decision. So after that, the army said bye-bye. Find other places to grow and develop. And so his parents were very high up in British society, like I said, and so they had some connections with the government. So now he becomes the Chancellor of the Exchequer. For us, that would be like the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, right? Like the chief economist for the country. And Winnie didn't know much about economics. And he comes up with this monetary and fiscal policy that sends Great Britain into the worst depression they've ever had in the history of their country. Failure after failure after failure. You see how this pattern of poor Winnie. Then, communism comes up. And the government is asked to take a stand or a position on communism. And the government says, takes no stand, no position. And Winnie says to the government leaders, "Are you nuts? Are you crazy? Communism is against everything that we're talking about as a democracy and for freedom." They didn't do anything. They ignored it. Then Nazism comes up. And the British government is asked to take a stand on Nazism, and they don't. And Winnie says to the government leaders, "Are you crazy? If we don't take a position, the world as we know it is going to end. It's not going to last." Well, Britain ignored them until the Nazis started bombing London, and then it got their attention. So then they called Winnie in. Winston Churchill. And they called him in. And if it wasn't for Winnie, if it wasn't for Winston Churchill, the whole world would have been in totalitarianism. All right? Failure after failure after failure after failure in his life. And then he got the greatest success of all. He was eventually the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. He was eventually voted by the people of Great Britain as its greatest citizen. He gets on TV, they ask him, "What's your secret to your success?" You know what he says? "Success? I'm nothing but failure, mostly. But my thing is," he said, "is never give in. Never give in. When you fail, you keep going. When you fail, you keep going. When you fail, you keep going." And it's that kind of attitude we need to have in our hearts. If we're going to have hearts of peace, we're going to fail. But we just got to get up again. Look at these 14 stations of the cross. Of these 14 stations, 3 times, Jesus falls. And he gets up again. Knowing they're going to kill him, he still gets up. And so when you fail, that's just like to say, "Okay, game over, I'm done." No. You keep trying. The world needs peace. The world needs swords and spears turned into plowshares and pruning hooks. What did Jesus say in Matthew's Gospel? "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Now that's a title worth aspiring to. Amen.